Daybreak, 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 the Daybreak Show.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
All right, good morning. Good to have you join us this morning on the program.
Thank you very much.
All
Good
right.
to be here again.
Thank you so much. With us is Dr. Shino KAWONISE.
All right, Dr. Shino, please, we want to know, do you see as public university autonomy as an option, as the solution to the incessant face-off between the federal government and Asuu?
Yeah, thank you very much. A very quick correction before we go into the topic. I am not Dr. Shino KAWONISE, I'm just Mr. Shino KAWONISE.
Oh.
All right, thank you.
Yes, I taught in the university, but I do not possess a PhD.
Oh, okay.
So just a very small correction.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a very good topic that we need to really discuss to the root. The issue of university autonomy is actually not an option. It is an imperative. It is not an option, but an imperative. Because when you look at the very basis, the very philosophical foundation of university, it's not something that you find to some political authority somewhere. Universities have what we call relative autonomy. Relative autonomy in the sense that they will have the power to run the affairs of the day-to-day affairs of the university as the see. The government lays the educational policy of the state, the federal government, or wherever. Even private universities, they operate within those policies. But the day-to-day running of the university cannot be tied to the interference of some external authority. A university that does not possess this relative autonomy is actually not a university. So, and that is a very, very big conception that the Nigerian government keeps missing. And of course, when we talk of relative autonomy, we are not saying that, okay, the university is absolutely autonomous. That also does not exist anywhere. The university, of course, is being funded, partly funded by the government, because the government does not fund any university 100%. The students still pay some amount of money, some stakeholders still make some contributions, grants come in, and all of that, from university. So you have very different sources, various sources of funding in the university. But you see, when we talk of relative autonomy, every university has got what we call the governing council of that university. More than half of the membership, including the chairman of the governing council, is appointed by the government. So the government already has representation in a university system. In terms of policy, in terms of management, it is only where you have, in terms of academic decisions, that the Senate of the university is so fully composed of academics in that position. But in terms of management, execution of policy and all of that, the government is already, heavily represented. The chairman of council is appointed, by the government. Even the NUC representative on the council of all the universities are government appointees. So when we are talking of university autonomy, we are not saying that the government is totally divorced from the management of the university. It is the governing council that, is the employer of all employees of the university, academic, non-academic. It is the governing council. It is the governing council that sets the ball rolling in terms of the appointment of, principal officers of the university, the VC, the two deputy vice chancellors, the registrar, the librarian, and of course, the librarian and the bursar. These are the principal officers of the university, all appointed by the governing council that the government, has, majority representation. So the issue of university autonomy is not an option; it is an imperative. And the very reason for that is that you cannot have a proper environment for learning, for innovation, for research when critical elements of decision making for decision making, it can go back. The terrible thing that is happening in the last 2 years under this government, in fact, we've never heard about it. The university management has even lost the power to recruit. If a university wants to recruit now, you have to go to Abuja Federal University. You have to go to Abeokuta if it's a state university. I've never had that kind of thing before. So even the power to recruit the relevant staff, the necessary staff, has been taken away from the university. The payroll now is processed from Abuja through the nonsense they call IT. Where is that done anywhere in the world? Nigeria did not invent university. The first university in Nigeria, started in 1948. The university has been, operating for centuries. It's only when it came to Nigeria that we are now even abusing the very fundamental basis of university education. So it is not an option, it's an imperative.
All right. If you say that it is not an option, rather an imperative, now, claiming university autonomy while living off the federal government, doesn't that raise a moral question?
I didn't get that.
Now, what I'm saying, or the question I'm asking is, if Asuu is clamoring for university autonomy while living off the federal government, isn't that raising a moral question, as it is only natural that he who pays the piper should dictate the tune?
No, it goes beyond that. Like I said, the federal government, the state government does not even fund the university 100%. It does not fund the university 100%. If you are funding, even if you are funding it 100%, there are certain philosophical basis of a university. It goes beyond who pays the piper, who pays the stone. If you are, the university is meant for a certain purpose. You are not going to achieve that purpose if you are shackling, the university is shackled, to some administration outside. If we are saying that actually means that we do not understand the philosophical basis of a university. A government can have an airline, but you don't tell the pilot how he's going to fly the airplane. It doesn't matter whether you are funding it. If you are, the fact that you are funding it doesn't mean that you should now deny the very basis of that entity that you say you are funding. It doesn't. There's no contradiction there. There's no contradiction. The university cannot function if the authorities there cannot decide. They cannot control their payroll. They cannot, even control admission. All of this, they are just the very essence. A human being has got certain features. A human being that doesn't have certain organs cannot be a human being. So if you are talking of an institution has got its reason with her, and it has got its own characteristics, and the modus operandi. It doesn't matter whether you are funding it. If you are funding something that is not that particular essence, then it comes to naught. So there is no contradiction that you are, because what you are going to get is going to be an abuse, a chimera of sorts, a phony creature that detracts from the original conception of that institution. Without autonomy, the university is not a university. They must determine their curriculum according to the general guidelines laid out by the Nigerian University Commission. They must determine what goes on. If a university vice chancellor, they cannot even recruit, and a graduate assistant without taking it to Abuja, it's a problem. And of course, they are saying, they are using the recruitment process and all of that. So the solution now is to say, okay, we know that they are stealing the taxpayers' money. Do you now say because they are stealing taxpayers' money, citizens should no longer pay taxes? No, we have to address the stealing. We can't say, okay, because when we pay taxes now, they embezzle the taxes, we should not. So if there are abuses, if there are procedural, abuses or errors within the internal mechanism of the university, we must address that. And the government has mechanisms for addressing that through decision panels, through their representatives on the governing council. and all of that. So the issue of okay, who pays it's just a misconception. It's an abuse of the very essence of university of the university as an institution in the educational process.
Now, if the university system must be truly autonomous, then it must fund itself. Now, we all know, the way our federal universities are, and of course, the amount or the school fees they pay, that it is somewhat, still tiny compared to state and even private universities. Now, if the universities must be truly autonomous, don't you see this coming back to the parents and affecting the pockets of the parents?
No, that is what you are trying to clarify. A university without relative autonomy is not a university. That is what we need to clear. It doesn't matter, okay, if you want a university of autonomy, then go and fund yourself, as though the university has no role to play in the society. The government is not doing the society any favor by funding university, because your economy cannot go beyond the very good basis that we have in Nigeria if you do not fund education. Education is a social service that has very, very, very deep implications for the politics of the country, for the economy of the country, for the growth and the well-being of it, even for the security of that country. So it is, what do we do with taxpayers' money? What do we do with the resources in the hand of government if you are not funding something as basic as education? And the fact that you are funding a university doesn't mean that you now remove the essence of that university. What I'm saying is that autonomy is like the lifeblood of a university. Drain it, remove it. It's like you have drained away the blood of that university. Unless you do not understand what university stands for, how they operate. Without that independence, relative independence, I said, university cannot fulfill its function, cannot fulfill its destiny in the society. So, if you want funding, if you want autonomy, then go and fund yourself. That's a misnomer. That is denying. That is showing a very deep ignorance of the very essence of university. Go back to Oxford. Go back to Cambridge. These are universities that have been in existence for centuries. They have what they call autonomy. Even where you have private universities and all of that, the founder or the professors must grant that autonomy to them. Because, okay, this is a private university, parents pay money, maybe they pay the full amount and all of that. But that does not take away the fundamental basis of relative autonomy or the fundamental need for relative autonomy in university. Like I said, autonomy is never absolute. That's why we say it's relative autonomy, because the government is there in the management. You have the government council. Maybe I don't think there's any vice chancellor in the university that can sign any contract of even 5 million naira. You have to take it to the council, and the council, it is the government basically that appoints the council. The chairman of council. So what we are saying is that, look, in terms of day-to-day running, you want to buy a truck of diesel, you have to go to Abeokuta to go and see the commissioner to go and get approved. That's not a university. You have to go. The number of staff that you need now, you have to take it to the budget office in Abuja to put it in the budget before you can. And then they have to sign it. The Secretary General has to put it in the nonsense they call IP. The universities are not run that way. We are not going to invent our own, form of university and all of that. So what I'm saying is that it's a fundamental, it is fact, it is a core. There's something that, there are certain features that distinguish a human being from a dog, for instance. When you see a dog, you see certain features, you know that this is a dog. When you see a human being, you know that this is a human being. So if those features are not there, then a human being cannot be a human being without autonomy. Then that relative autonomy is university is not a university. It doesn't matter where the funding is coming from, whether students are paying the full value of their education or whether it's being subsidized somewhere or something. The university must retain what we call relative autonomy.
All right, Mr. Shino, one of the bone of contention between the federal government and ASU is the payroll system. And the federal government introduced the IPPIS, while the ASU brought up UTAS, which is the University Transparency Account System. What is the reservation of ASU to IPPIS, and what is the government's reservation to UTAS?
Now, maybe we should go back, maybe we should start from the basis of it. The government came in and said that, oh, universities have been, you have a bloated staff, they are just, employing people and all of that. And that is not false. At some point, I was a member of the governing council of Olabisi Onabanjo University. Now, and one of the things that we discovered in that place was also over-bloated, payroll, staff that did not need. The NUC, for instance, had what they call staff-student ratio, that, okay, academic staff, the number of students in the humanities, and I don't think it has changed. In the humanities, for instance, it is 30-1. That is, you have one lecturer to 30 students. So that means that if you have a faculty, for instance, that had maybe 300 students, you have 10 academic staff. I think in the humanities, that is the arts, sciences, and all of that, you have, in the sciences, it's 25-1, Greek 15-1, and I think in medicine 10-1. So, but when we got there, we found out that, okay, where you had that 300 students, for instance, that we are supposed to have, let's say, 10 lecturers and all of that, they had 30, they had 40. So we needed to prove to something. They were borrowing money, to pay staff that they didn't need. So what I'm saying is that was correct. That's what the federal government said. Maybe corruption there, they are overblowing. But the solution to headache is not to cut off the head. We solved that problem without taking away the authority of the university management to recruit. We did what we call right-sizing. And of course, a lot of my former colleagues were not happy with us, were not happy with me in particular and all of those. But we did what we had to do, So now, the fact that there are malpractices, like I said, okay, there's corruption, they will invest money in government, therefore, don't pay taxes again. No, you don't do things that way. So now, the fact that you have that over-bloated, salary, tax structure, and of course, consequently, salary structure doesn't mean that you not take away the autonomy, the autonomy of the management. You have to address it. And there's ways of addressing it. Even call your own governing council to order. The chairman of council, you appointed the chairman of council. So let them go and do the right thing. If they need to do right sizing, they need to do the right sizing. If they now need to say, okay, Mr. Bashir, so this point, you cannot recruit without the approval of the governing council. That is still within the university system. You don't have to remove the authority to take away the authority to recruit and then take it to something in Abuja. Do you know what happened? The power to recruit was taken away from the university management and taken to some ministry in Abuja, Accountant General Office, the office of the Director of Budget of the Federation and all of that. You know what they do? Now, if you want to recruit 5, they will also add another 5. Otherwise, they are not going to sign it for you. So we now have a situation that is even worse than what led to that problem in the first instance. Go and ask anybody, that is what is going on. No university vice chancellor will get approval to recruit anybody without the input of the National Assembly. They also they will bring their own. They approve it. We are not going to approve it if you don't also take our own. So the problem that they are saying that they want to solve is not complicated by the culture that in Abuja. And then again, who is even the one that is correcting? Is Abuja any more credible than those universities? And then you don't exhibit any kind of integrity in terms of administration and whatever. Is Abuja less corrupt than those universities? Okay, if the university is corrupt, you now take it to a place that is even more corrupt. Have you solved the problem? So the IT itself, integrated payroll system that they put all the staff. Apart from the technical issues and all of those things that are there, it's fundamentally wrong. You cannot tie the payroll of the university to some centralized place in Abuja. The trend anywhere in the world in terms of even administration, governance and all of that is to decentralize, not to centralize more and more. It's to decentralize. So IT has problems. it is a matter of the compromising nature. I mean, the magnanimous of Asuu, that they are even talking about it. They are also saying, okay, if you want to do it, this is what you can do. Okay, this is something that is homegrown and all of that. Okay, you can also use that. That is the magnanimity of Asuu. They are not even supposed to even discuss it in the participants. But they said, okay, if you are insistent on having something that will be transparent, okay, this is the platform that we have created. And they have tested this. They have seen that integrity, in fact, is far better than even the IP that they are talking about. IP, despite IP, they still have ghost workers. Even at the federal MDAs, military departments and agencies of the federal government, they still have it. Every time they are contending with that. So it's even a system that is fundamentally flawed in terms of even technical integrity of it. So IP, as a solution to the thing, is actually not a solution. It is an abuse of the concept of university autonomy, and of course it's not. Now, so many people are now saying, okay, let me tell you the operation of the IP, for instance. As a university lecturer, you can have full appointment as a lecturer in FUNAB, for instance, in Abeokuta. You also have the liberty to be a visiting lecturer elsewhere, maybe in some private university, 2 or 3, depending on what you can handle. In fact, that is the way universities are run, because no university can have all the full-time hands that they have. You know what has happened to Nigerian university in terms of brain drain and all of that. So the only way that many of these universities survive is to have visiting lecturers elsewhere. Now with IP, the name of us there as a full-time lecturer in FUNAB. Now, if you are not visiting University of Lagos, that maybe you are in banking and finance and they don't usually have them, or you are a lawyer, they don't usually have them. Now you are visiting something. What's your name? Of course, again, is something that you are getting from Allah. Once even a full pay, IP to council will flag your name. You are not going to receive your salary in FUNAB. You are not going to receive your salary. Those are the fundamental things that system does not understand the way the university system is structured. So those are the fundamental problems that are there. But UCAS takes care of all of that. If you know actually how that, so that takes care of it. It will be inputted there that, okay, if you're full-time here in FUNAB, it's also a visiting lecturer here in this place, it's also a visiting lecturer in that place. Because that is in fact actually a way of addressing the very poor pay of university lecturer. When you somebody that has spent 20 years as a professor and you give him 425,000 because the maximum salary is 500,000, by the time they remove taxes, all these other deductions, most professors even get 450,000 naira. That is extremely embarrassing. When you have all of these all these IT boys that they take 1 million naira, 1.2 million naira at 10 points, and the professor that forced them, you are locking them up and giving them that kind of amount. So, and what they also use to cope with all of that, you are also denying them through IT. So it is fundamentally wrong, my sister.
All right. Now, by autonomy, Asuu asked the government to let the universities generate regulatory policies internally to deal with particular, peculiar and specific problems confronting each university. But the government retorted saying if they would give the autonomy, then they will also give the universities financial autonomy, meaning that each university will be let alone. That is possibly, abandoned to generate fund internally for its sustenance. But then, some of the school of thought that concession may just be could work here. That is bringing in private investors to also step in and take care a part of the university, and then get to also, do their own investment in order to be able to ease this tension a bit. What is your thought about concession?
Universities cannot be concessioned. Public universities cannot be concessioned. By the time you concession them, they also become private universities. And what we are saying is that education should be seen as a social service that pays far, far more dividends than what we have invested in it. Now, we have a country where the minimum wage is 30,000 naira. People workers on 30,000 naira, they also wanted to marry and to get children. So now, how did they now educate their own children if education becomes commercialized? By the time you take concession, if I invest in a university, I have to reduce my investment because it is not a charity. I'm not a philanthropist. If I want to do philanthropy, I will do it elsewhere. But if we are saying that I should bring my money to come and invest there by concession and all of that, it becomes in essence like a private university that the average of that worker cannot afford. The average children of the peasant cannot afford. And then do you know something? As Andela, Andela, this tech company by Nigerians, the motto is that whereas talents are evenly distributed, opportunities are not. What does that mean? They know that talent, the son of that peasant, may be the one that is producing the next Nobel Prize winner in medicine. Talents are evenly distributed, whether you are rich or poor, you are the son of organizer or you are the son of the permanent secretary in the ministry or something. Talents are evenly distributed, but opportunities are not. It is the duty of government to equalize opportunity, to make opportunity, education accessible to all of that. So that is why you cannot say, if they want university autonomy, then let them go and fund themselves and all of that. Let them go and look for the funding and all. The implication is that we are going to lose talent. Those children that are talented, of the poor people that are talented, will not. I don't even know any civil servant that, if a civil servant is not corrupt, that will be able to even fund a world in Continental University, for instance. Because how much is even a permanent secretary that's from special grade army? By the time you have 2 or 3 children in university, you have one in Baptist, you have one in Covenant or Zima or University, something like that. How much are you going to, except you are moonlighting, you are getting some money under the table and all of that. You cannot do it. So that is the essence of public university. It is to equalize opportunity to everybody, whether you are poor, you are country. So education must be subsidized. And when the government does that, it's not doing the society any favor. Because the society will not grow if there is no education. If you look at even someone who has graduated and doesn't have a formal employment and has gone into farming, that farming that unemployed graduate is going to do is going to be done differently and better than the one that didn't go to school. Because it's on Facebook, it's looking at the latest innovation, it's looking at the product that they are marketing, and all of that. It's there on social media, it's getting information, and that information that is getting because it's educated, it can read and write, will impact what it's producing. The production basis of, the productive basis of that society will go up. It is not by accident that you see, the positive correlation between the GDP of a country and the level of education that you have, between the standard of living of a country and the level of education that you have, between even the security of a country and the level of education that you have. And we published an article by Azan Jimba in Newsco today, the newspaper that I publish every day, talking about the security implication of Asuu strike. When you keep children at home, when you keep the students at home, what do you think you are doing? As they say, I do have my man's mind in the devil's workshop. You are keeping them there. Apart from even the economic impact of that. Okay, I'm from Ogun in the Jabuna local government where Olabisi Onabanjo University is cited. When the school in Central, you have about 10,000 students in that city town. Now, on the basis, make a very good assumption. If a student spends 1,000 naira every day, 10,000 students will inject 10 million naira into the economy of Agro on every single day that you have them in school. 10 million naira, 1,000. Because there's no way that a student will not spend 1,000. He's going to take Okada to school, he's going to do this one, he's going to. So at the end of the day, an average student will spend 1,000 in a day. He's going to feed, he's going to do so many things, he's going to buy pure water and all of that. So when you now send them out because of Asuu, because of the strike that has been imposed on Asuu, because of this nonsense that it is Asuu, you have to look for alternative to strike. I've been asking people who have been saying that nonsense that can you suggest for us what other alternative that you can get even this government to talk to you? Not just the government that is reasonable. They sign agreement, they enter an agreement that they are not going to, they are not going to honor. So when we are talking about all of this, funding of the education, the government is not doing it. That is the very essence of government. A government that wants to develop its own society, that wants peace, doesn't want this insecurity. You must keep students in school. You must give them, you must fund it and make it accessible to other people. Those who are privileged, can take their children to private school. Because all of that impact. If you even have more, you can send your children to abroad. Some of us have children abroad because you can afford. I'm not a public officer. I left public office about 11, 12 years ago. So I have the liberty to do that. There's no morality. There's no moral question about that. So, but if you cannot afford it, let us make that public university to also be qualitative, to also be so that the children of the citizen, the children of the worker, the children of even the artisan can also send their something, their own words to those institutions. So that is the issue. So if you say you want to concession the university to private investors and all of that, it is like saying you are privatizing those universities, and of course their fees will not become like what they are charging a paper. Like you are reading law there, I think it's going to about almost 2 million naira per session now and all of that. How many of us can afford that?
All right, Mr. Shina, the federal government has said it cannot meet all the items in both the 2009 and December 2020 agreement, while Asuu insisted that lecturers not call off the strike until all the demands are met. Now, some sources from the federal government have said some Asuu members don't want the strike to end because some of them are already working in the private institution. What do you have to say to this?
Number one, it is not true at the government. You can always afford anything that is of priority to you. And you say this as a general statement. This government has said that it cannot provide 200 billion naira and all of that. For all the universities, federal universities that you have in this country, it's the same government that has got approval of National Assembly to subsidize fuel for 4 trillion naira, to the tune of 4 trillion naira. Even if you are giving us 200 billion naira in the next 5 years, that comes to about 1 trillion naira and all of that. We are doing this because people do not understand the essence of education in the society, what education does. We are doing this because it is not part of their priority. They can always find the money. They find the money, they can find the money to fund their private, their official jets and all of this. How much that the president and the vice president spend feeding in Asuu work there. It is just not a matter of priority to them. What is giving the right to this one? It's not failure. They are just taken to the National Assembly. That National Assembly has approved for the government to subsidize petrol. Fuel. Just not even all the cellular products. Diesel is not being subsidized. Kerosene is not being subsidized. Aviation fuel is not being subsidized. It's only petrol. 4 trillion naira. And you and I know the scam that is going on there, the corruption, the split that is going on there. When you say, okay, we are consuming how many millions of liters every day, 100 million liters of every day. Who is consuming? How many? And you say, okay, it's being struggled. We know all the things that is going there. When it comes to the money they are going to share among themselves, they will find the money. So it's not true. Don't let us buy the lie, the propaganda that the government cannot fund it. And as I've said, if you spend 10 naira in education, on education today, you are going to reap a benefit of more than 1,000, about 100-fold of what you have spent in the next couple of years. By the time, in terms of productivity, in terms of growth in your GDP and the rest of it. And we are now finding out now that even when you don't take care of this, they look at the Almanjiri phenomenon in the north. Is that not those Almanjiri that you have failed to put in school that are now the bandits causing all of this havoc? The federal government now has to spend close to 2 trillion naira every day fighting insecurity, tackling insecurity. Which one is cheaper? If you give us 200 billion naira now that they are paying all of this is very modern. Okay, let us fund this university. Let us do this thing. These are the basic things. But when you share these things, it becomes very, very, little amount of money. Now, there is when you go to the Ministry of Disaster, Humanitarian Disaster, what do they call that ministry? Where Shadia is the minister. How much did they spend? They said they are sharing to Nigeria 500-600 billion in the last 1 year. Who is getting the money? If you know, Femi, if you know, tell us who that you know your neighbor that has got that 5,000 naira from Shadia that they say they are they said they have spent 600 billion. So it's not because they can't find this money. It is just because it is not part, of their priority. So that's what I'm saying. It is we cannot afford it. Asuu is doing all this level and all of that. And all this conspiracy theory that because Asuu members are teaching SEO and all of that, it's not true. Their main salary is due from their main university. Maybe they are getting 50,000 naira or something. They are not because of that. Then they are not going to work and all of that. In any case, it's also loss of income to them. They should say, okay, because they are doing all of this and all of this. Nobody is happy. I know Asuu members. I've been a university lecturer. I was a university lecturer in Asuu for 7 years. So I know exactly, and I've been a university administrator. We had our disagreement. But on fundamental principles, we cannot disagree. On fundamental principle of autonomy, of adequate funding for the university, and then the tool of strike. Because when they say, okay, Asuu, they go on strike, let them be creative. I say, okay, give us the creative something that you can use in dealing with this kind of the capital government, who does not understand even the effect of agreement. When that agreement was signed in 2009, I was a member of the Government Council of Olympics about 13 years ago. And we are still battling. No, 2009, yes, I think 13 years ago. And they've still not been able to do their own part of that agreement, which is to the benefit of the society. So that is what we want to say. It is not that there's nothing that Asuu is. I look at this thing. I'm no longer a lecturer. I left the university said as far back as 1997. How many years ago? About 25 years ago. It's not that I'm drawing any salary there, but the truth must be told. There's no way you can say any society will grow without, funding the university, funding education, and all of this. And all the benefits that we are even having, the little thing that we have in terms of the debt and all of this, it was Asuu that it was Asuu that fought for all of these things. We need to be very grateful to Asuu and support what they are doing. Because if you had a government that, is credible, a government that recognizes that if you enter into an agreement, you have to, do your own part of it. So we want to say what it is. It is very painful for Asuu to be going on. I know I have several of them that are very close, the officials and all of that. The president, all of that will put together and will ask them, okay, what are the steps that you have taken? They will tell you, they will tell you. They will not even call them for a meeting until the strike has been declared. They will not even. They will write them, they will call them, they will not take their call. This I know for a fact. So the issue of strike, okay, it's strike all the time. It's very good. They also they have children in the university system that are also affected by this strike. But it is imposed on them. You just don't have any choice about it.
All right. Now, how can we reimagine higher education funded in Nigeria to the point that it can be sustainable and deliver the expected outcome?
Now, in the issue of funding, I can tell you, as a former university administrator, that Asuu has got very robust proposals for the funding of education. It was Asuu that brought about this year fund, education tax fund, 2% of something profit and all of that. It was Asuu. They even agree, but later they were forced to agree and they are doing that. So when you see some of the structure that you see in most of the universities now is funded from ETF, funding, ETF funding and all of that. They brought that idea. And then many of them also have what to call IGR in terms of, if you go to the University of Ibadan, you get the conference center where they have event center, they are making money there, they are producing pure water, they are producing food, they are producing even brief, and they are making money to supplement what they are getting. And at times, they generate even up to 20-25% of their total funding requirement and all of that. But the thing is this, no matter the efforts of the university that you have, it is still the responsibility of government to fund this university. There are no two ways about it. Okay, the money that they are getting from food oil, the factor that we are paying that is even more than what they are getting from natural resources now. What are they going to do? Why are we paying taxes if they are not going to use it to fund something that is generally beneficial for all of us? When we have this education, we are going to benefit. All of us are going to benefit. And that's the only way. When you fund health, happiness, we are going to benefit. All of us are going to benefit. So there's no other way. The government must just take it as part of the priority. What percentage of the budget for the federal government that goes to education generally, we are not even talking about university education. It's less than 10%. This point, I think the last budget about 6.8% overall. So why is that done? When UNICEF even recommended that this 25% of the budgetary allocations go to education, they are not doing that. No university can embark on any capital project beyond. So they are also doing all of this, long distance something what they call setup, this part-time courses and all that.
Programs.
To generate additional funds. So the universities are doing their best in terms of that. Because you cannot just sit. There's no way. Education has to be, subsidized. At least for those people who have no means of sending their children to the university. And it is in the interest of all of us. It is in the interest of all of us. Do you know something? Go and look at your statistics. Even in public secondary schools, the children that perform best in WAEC and down, they are not even usually from private schools. It's from the public schools. So you need to pay attention. Those are the places where you have the raw talent. The gifted children, they are there. They are not from all these our elite homes where we are even spoil our children and all of this. They are basically from there. So let us pay attention. That is where the thing is. That is where the need is. So there's no escaping the fact that the government must fund education at all levels. You must fund education. The state government, the federal government, they must fund it. They must fund it because it's socially beneficial. It is when we think that, okay, when we do this thing, we can see we are being forced to do some spending. It is lack of understanding. When we have people like that, managing this country, it is very unfortunate that they just cannot understand the very essence of education. It is the greatest social investment that you can have in your country, in your people. The people, most of the countries now that are living in terms of the GDP, it's not because of resources. It is because of human capital. And human capital is a function of your education. Japan, if you go to the economy of growth by Paul Baran, Japan was not escaped colonialism because they didn't even have any resources that were passed the colonialism to be colonized. So Japan, from the beginning, had no natural resources. The kind of resources, solid mineral that we have in Nigeria, they never had it. All Japan developed by developing its human capital. Look at what's happening all over the world. The tech titans all over the world now. This is not education. So it is the 90% interest of this country to know that government must support education, must fund education adequately. We all go to benefit. The private sector will benefit. Everyone will benefit. The private sector is already paying its own something. So that we not say, the private, because 2% of the profit of the companies, before they take it and they put it in its work.
All right.
So, they are not contributing. Your taxes are there.
Daybreak. The Daybreak Show.